This is Train to Perform, the undisputed alpha podcast in training, fitness, and sports performance. Here, you'll develop your skills with the cold, hard facts in fitness, sports performance, recovery, and nutrition. Real, tried and true, evidence-based facts that have been proven to move you faster, move you stronger, and move you forward. Now, here's your host of Train to Perform, Julian Sisman.
First, I want to thank you for, taking your time out. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy person.
Good.
And it's to take your time it's very valuable. So I want to make this kind of brief. I have a few questions.
Sure.
But it's one of those things where I just want to learn about, your story. I know you've been all over with soccer. I've played soccer pretty much since I was like 4. I messed around with a little bit of European soccer, but not like high level, but mostly in the US. But I have a friend that is respects you highly that I work with. Because he's a Roma fan. So,
they're a very passionate group.
Yeah. So he'll probably be listening to this and he'll crack up. But to start off, like a really like first thing is like, what's your story? Like, why did you get into performance training? I'm sure you weren't I could be wrong, but thinking that you're going to be a performance coach for soccer, I don't know. But just kind of briefly talk about that.
Yeah, no, it's not something I was like, oh, this is what I want to do with my life. I'm a former athlete. I grew up ski racing from Northern Alberta in Canada. So pretty much the farthest thing removed from soccer, and grew up ski racing and ended up racing in college, down in the States. And so ended up taking, I wanted to stay in sports, but wasn't sure what I wanted to do, like the medical aspect of stuff. Ended up taking my athletic training and biology degrees in undergrad, and then had a speed and development kind of consulting company after that. Ended up going back to PT school, became a physical therapist, had a practice in Seattle for a couple years, and then had the opportunity to go work for a company that was formerly known as Athletes Performance, now Exos. Mm-hmm. And then that was kind of my first stint in working in kind of high-end performance with athletes. And so we saw all kinds of different groups, whether it's elite military, football, basketball, soccer, you name it. They got the contract with the German national team in 2004. With when Jurgen Klinsmann took over. I wasn't involved at that time, but ended up moving back to the mountains. We wanted to get kind of back to the mountains, and so still consulted with Exos. Ended up working for a pro cycling team for 5 years, going back and forth to Europe, and then the opportunity with Jurgen came up when he took the job at Bayern Munich, and that was kind of my first stint in European soccer, or soccer in general. And so I was a fitness rehab coach there, stayed for a couple of years, came back. We had some family stuff we needed to take care of, and then joined back up with what was then Exos, and doing some stuff with technology with Adidas. Then joined the German national team in 2011, helping in their camps, and then was with them for the World Cup of 14 and again in 18, which it didn't work quite as well the second time. And then had the opportunity to be the high performance manager at AS Roma. So that started in 15. And then again, our kids were getting older, need to get them out of high school. So moved back in 2000, end of 2018 after the World Cup in Russia, and then joined a performance intelligence company called Kitman Labs as a director of performance science for them. And then in January 2019, had the opportunity to join up with Greg and his team with U.S. men's national team. And so, that's where I'm at to date.
So what was your reason for transit? And kind of going back to the beginning, what was your reason for, doing ATC and then transitioning to a PT? Like, were you doing ATC work, or was it just, it made more sense to be a little bit, more of a higher level type rehab?
Yeah. I mean, it was really to gain more knowledge, and from a kind of billing, what you could do, the flexibility of what you could do it with. You were limited by kind of different legal scenarios in various states, where the PT side of things just opened a lot more doors to have both sides of it. And then the other one was just have a greater knowledge base of, treating and understanding injuries and things of that nature.
Okay. So at Athletes Exos now, was your main role like as a physical therapist, or are you doing mostly sports performance work?
In that role was more as a physical therapist, and then kind of return to performance work with the athletes, because obviously you're rehabbing them and then driving their rehab program, integrating it with the strength and conditioning side of things.
Okay. And where was, the demographic, were you working with mostly pros, college, or is it something where they had a setup where you were working with all ages?
Yeah, it was mainly pro and then college. And from the college side, it was a couple individual college athletes that would come through, but mainly combine prep guys that were, college guys making their move to the professional ranks. So that was kind of the main demographic at that point.
What do you feel that was sort of, something that you learned a lot from Exos that, kind of helped you propel you to where you are now? I mean, I know they're a huge company. I have their performance specialist
certification.
It's a great certification. A lot of good education comes out of there. A lot of great, strength coaches have come from there and still do. I guess what is something that you feel like they do right that's helping, to sort of keep the, them at this high level, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's the systematization of performance training, right? Like having a really good structure that no matter what information you learn, you can attach it to that structure. And it provides also, because you have that structure, it provides you this checklist of, what are all the things I need to cover with this athlete? And then, a good structure to make sure you can put those all in place to move the needle. And then again, as you acquire new information, or as new information comes out, or research or studies, it's easy to kind of pull that book off the shelf and put the new one back in. But your whole reference kind of library and system is all intact and integrated and kind of full 360.
Okay. And is that, so what, were you part of the development of Bridge? I know a lot of companies use it, private facilities. Is that did they come up with that, or is it something where they kind of partnered with a company and that was developed? Or how'd that come about?
Yeah, Bridge is an independent company. So Michael Scharf is the CEO of Bridge. And they're a software startup that, saw a need in the industry. And, they're probably a best of class tool in that area. And, and then I think they just developed a partnership with Exos to, be able to get their programming out to the masses. Because as you mentioned, a lot of people go through the education program, and then having a tool to actually get those programs out to clients in a really efficient, clean way was what they were looking for, and Bridge obviously can do that.
I mean, I'm sure you're a little bit biased on it, but how would you compare bridge to, the other similar tools that, strength coaches are using? I mean, I know there's a number of different tools that are used at college level, private, high school, and things like that. Would you?
Yeah. I mean, I can't fairly say one way or the other because I haven't had the time in like a team builder or team heroic that I've had in bridge. So I think their models are a little different. If I could be wrong, but I think with a few of them, they have this kind of app store-ish kind of model where you can buy programs and download and do stuff that way, where, bridge doesn't have that. And so I think I'm sure there's pros and cons to everyone. I've used bridge right from the get-go and, super familiar with it. I like the fact that they're consistently developing new features and upgrading their programs and upgrading, their software, and they take, the input from the consumers that are using it and the coaches that are using it to upgrade it in the best way possible. And, from my experience, at least for the folks that I've worked with, the user experience on the client end or athlete end has also been good.
Awesome. So kind of going back to you working with very, pro level players, you've worked in the pros, I guess, here now, and then you've worked in Europe. What do you feel is the difference in sort of the culture around like S&C, return to play? Is it much of a difference at that level? I mean, do a lot of the guys buy in? Do you see it trickle down to the, the lower levels, and helping like the youth, and it help, kind of like developing players? So they're, you've worked at probably two of the biggest clubs in the world, especially Bayern, where I'm sure at the youth level, strength and conditioning is pretty, utilized at, consistently. And I'm sure at Roma is the same thing. So do you feel like it's helped players develop there, or is it mostly a different from, Italian and the German point of view versus, the US point of view?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a complex question in the sense that, I was at Bayern, 10 years ago now. And so I'm not sure what they've updated since I was there. I think, with the globalization of information and the internet, I think things are becoming more consistent around the globe, and you don't have these kind of massive cultural differences as much as you used to. With that said, I think soccer or football, European football, is a sport that is very highly technical, has a high technical demand to it. And so obviously the motivation is to spend as much time playing and spend as much time training with the ball as possible. So that's kind of first and foremost. But with that said, the athletes only spend 3 to 5% of the time, game time, with the ball. The rest is getting from A to B. And so I think you're seeing a shift in general in the soccer landscape to implementing more strength and conditioning to improve performance outputs. Now, as it relates to kind of, North America to Europe, I would say that at least in my experience, in North America, there's a much bigger appetite for the weight room culture, just because of, all the different sports and the sports science and the marketing around it and the stuff you see on ESPN and things of that nature. That, US is a marketing machine. So that information and those stories get pushed out there. So they're a lot more mainstream. Where in Europe, it's, I think it's certainly happening. Is it happening to the extent it is in the States? I don't know. I would, if I had to go to Vegas, I would say not. But, with my time at Rome, we definitely had an extensive strength and conditioning and performance program set up through the academy, to the first team where kids were moved along from a developmental standpoint, and, certain requirements were trained at earlier ages so that when they got to the next level, they could be built on and move forward. So, those kind of things take time to see the fruits of their labor. Like Arsenal is another great example. Just, knowing Shad and being there and kind of witnessing it, you see that there's definitely a bigger effort there. So I think it's certainly happening in the UK from what I've noticed. But it's probably not as prevalent. It's getting more prevalent in more of the European cultures.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm just, me working in sort of the private sector and working with, younger kids. And then obviously seeing and having conversations with a lot of college strength coaches, and you probably see it as well, that it's a huge, the value for, especially at the college level, because, the way that the game is played at that level, it's much needed, I guess, I could say. No, but I totally understand when it comes to the pro level, it's a little bit different, especially in Europe. I'm sure not a lot of players buy in. Maybe I'm wrong, because they quote unquote say, like, I've gotten here, what do I need? Additional things, additional support.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly make the argument that America doesn't produce as much soccer talent as the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we're, as it relates to soccer, we're putting too much emphasis on getting in the weight room, where they need to get better ball skills and game skills, right? So they can go play. Because at the end of the day, that's what coaches want. I think they're first and foremost, they're scouting players based on their technical ability and knowledge of the game. And obviously you need some physical requirements to execute on those pieces, but, the order of importance is ball work and knowledge of game and being able to read and solve the problems within the game. And then from there, you continue to enhance all the other pieces. And, there's definitely, a lot of guys in the pro ranks that are totally bought into what performance training does for them, both from a performance side as well as a career longevity side. And I think a lot of guys that aren't bought in, they will get there because they realize, and you see it in any sport, not just soccer, that, when you're young, you're a little invincible. And until you kind of suffer your first big injury, or you're aging and competing for positions get a little tighter, then you're starting to, okay, now I need to peel the onion to really squeeze out every little piece of talent or ability to express the talent as possible. So I think just, and this is kind of hearsay, but, from colleagues, just the professionalism of Lewandowski and what he's doing. And I think there's a few of the German players that are like that, and what they give to their, what they do, in the weight room with a nutritionist or chef, like they're taking care of all the pieces, and, you see his dominance on the field, as well, at an older age. Obviously, he's not that old, but, kind of relative to the sport, still performing at a very high level.
Yeah. So talking about injury, what did you see was an injury that seemed to always occur and maybe reoccur with a lot of the high level pro athletes? And maybe kind of give an idea of like what your suggestions on, return to play. Because I'm sure a lot of what you see at that level occurs at a youth and college level as well.
Yeah, I mean, probably the most common in soccer is muscle strains, whether it's quad, probably hamstring more dominant than quad, or adductor groin. And so and the cause for those can be multifactorial, right? Like there's not one thing where it's like, oh, you have hamstring problems, I'm going to do a bunch of Nordic exercises and my hamstring problems are going to go away. And, that's not the case. People are really strong in their Nordics and there's still hamstring problems. So, it's very individual to the person. Sometimes it could be a mobility issue that's kind of the main point that's the limiting factor. So there's compensation. Sometimes it could be a stability factor that's the main point. Sometimes it could be just, are they physically prepped for the demands of what they're trying to accomplish? And then it can be all the above, right? Like those are just three of many factors that could be causing that. Did they get enough sleep? Are they recovered enough? Did they, what kind of nutrition are they putting in their body? Are they drinking alcohol and going training the next day? Like all these things add up to these problems. And so it's not an easy kind of one-stop shop. And that's where, kind of having the overall education that it is a multifactorial scenario and that you do need to, do all the right things to mitigate the possibilities of those. And, I think I mentioned the physically prepped, and then there's the physically recovered. So are you playing a bunch of congested fixtures where you're, not recovered enough and just the accumulation adds up to the point that your body breaks. So, variety of factors that go into that.
Was there a huge difference in working with Roma versus working with Bayern, as far as I don't want to say injuries, but just like, the way that they prepared, because everybody has their ways. I feel like the Germans are like crazy and want to go hard all the time. You have you have the Italians are very, very technical. The preparation might be a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, each culture has their kind of read on things. Definitely in Germany, things are structured and systematized, and they do. When I was at Bayern, we did work very hard, and didn't have a lot of injuries, but it was done in a very progressive, appropriate fashion. I think it's also led by the philosophy of the coach, because for the most part, they're driving the bus and saying, yeah, we'll do this, or no, we won't do that. And we'll do it for this long, or we won't do it for that long. And so, good or bad, I've had the opportunity to work with, 11 or 12 head coaches over the last 13 years, and everyone does it a little differently. Is there a right way or a wrong way? I would say what I've seen to work the best is coaches that are really organized. They have a good plan. They work that plan and continue to upgrade their plan, and then progressively overload their players, at higher intensities than would be expected in the games. And as a result, the guys are fit, fast, strong, and have a lower propensity for injury.
Awesome. So now that I guess you're back in the US, and I know you're still working with Kimmon Labs. What kind of brought you back into the private sector more? Are you more into the private sector, or are you more into just working with the US? I know you're doing both at the same time. Yeah. So I'm contracted by US Soccer 17 weeks a year. So it pretty much covers all national team breaks and tournaments, as well as any kind of support time needed to support our players around the globe, executing on whatever it is we need to accomplish to reach our goals. And then, the kind of the reason for joining Kitman was around, one of the problems I was trying to solve at Rome is we were collecting all this data, and we had a good chunk of data, but I didn't have the
tools or the resources to, kind of do the research around and answer more applied questions with it. And, once I spoke with Steve Smith, the CEO of Kitman, and understanding the direction of where they were going, which was exactly that, that was really intriguing to me. And the fact that I could work with multiple organizations, not just one, and helping them, put this process in place and move it forward so they can, ask real-time applied questions with their data. That was really intriguing to me. And it also, from a lifestyle perspective, was helpful. I can live in this background behind me, travel obviously to meet with teams and groups, but it allowed me to kind of be in a place that I could spend more time with my family. As the last 10 years has been in pro soccer. You don't get a lot of time off to take family vacations or celebrate birthdays or things of that nature. So to have that was great.
What just curious, like what were you trying to solve at Rome? Like, was there a specific piece of data that you were trying to figure out how to, like, what's going on with it?
Yeah, I mean, when you start collecting data, the first kind of step is just reporting on those data streams, right? Like, so what was your wellness? How much did you sleep? How much did you train one day to the next, and so forth, and loading variables. But then it's that multifactorial scenario that they all have a piece in this puzzle. So, hey, how much is too much? How much training is too much training before somebody gets injured? And then what are all the variables related to that? And so you end up with this kind of multifactorial analysis. And then, does GPS have a 30% weighting factor, as to the cause of the injury? Is it the strength that's the bigger propensity? And how much of each do you have to pay attention to? And at what point is that critical cutoff that, hey, I need to make sure if all my guys are above this level, or that, as it relates to their body and body type, what is that? And so, that's where I couldn't solve that. I could do basic, kind of stuff, univariate analysis, looking at correlations and relationships and statistical scenarios. But as we just chatted about, these injuries and situations are very multifactorial, and you need the resources to be able to look at them as such.
Yeah. So how do you, talking about sports science, like how do you see, do you see S&C more evolving to more of a sports science standpoint and kind of living in that space, and using sports science as a way to do S&C, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's where it's kind of funky. Our language gets us caught up in things that's a problem, right? Like if you're a strength and conditioning person, hopefully you're applying science every day. So, and if you're a physical therapist, hopefully you're applying science every day. If you're a doctor, you're applying science every day. So in actuality, we're all sports scientists, right? Like we're all have our nuance in the sport itself. And hopefully we're all applying the best of science to make that happen. And so I think where the catch is the ability to utilize data. So what's your data skills and computing skills like to do that? So are you going to see, in S&C programs or athletic training programs, there should be some, some more statistics, computing based classes, because that's the way things are going, right? Yeah. Computing, helping you do all this stuff. And you need to know how to write formulas in Excel and query data sheets and do power pivots and things like that, because that's, if you're collecting data, then you need to analyze that data. And so I think that's where, if you have that skill, and I know practitioners, like I have some base level of that skill, I wouldn't call myself exceptional in the technology side of things. But I do know people that are, strength and conditioning people first, that have unbelievable computing capacities, using R or Excel or those things. So they have both pieces. They have be able to look at the lens through an S&C or an athletic trainer or a physiotherapist, but they also have the ability to compute all the information necessary to get you the information you're looking for.
Awesome. So with the U.S. national team, I mean, is like how's that going with I'm sure it's a little bit different than the working with the German national team. Like what do you see is like sort of the difference? How are the players how's their attention towards like what you're providing for them as like S&C physiotherapy and things like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm super excited about where the U.S. program is and where the potential is. We've had the most players we've ever had playing in Champions League teams across Europe. So, a lot more talent. All that talent is like 23, 24 or younger. When you look at, 2022 and 2026, I think the coaching staff is probably one of the best coaching staffs I've ever been involved with. With Greg at the helm, phenomenal planner, communicator, organized, constantly looking to improve, leaving no rock kind of unturned. And then all the support staff and assistant coaches, performance coaches, have that same mentality. And so everyone's kind of got their ego aside, just trying to, do the absolute best job possible. And I think the players are very responsive to it. I think they recognize the quality. They appreciate the quality. They're learning, which at the end of the day, that's kind of the number one thing. And then I think, you'd have to ask the players, but I think they appreciate all the support that they get, on the performance, nutrition, therapy, medicine, that side of the fence as well to help them execute on their goals, both at the club and in the international side of things.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope they do well. I mean, I think you're right about with them being very young. I think it's a huge benefit for the long-term success. And I think the biggest thing is the fact that a lot of them have sort of started their careers at the high soccer level overseas. I think that's going to be a sort of like gives them a leg up on a lot of the older players, just because of the high level of soccer that they're playing. So I think you're right about that. I think the next couple World Cups should be interesting to see the results that So last couple questions here. What is something that you've done S&C, been a strength coach, physiotherapy for some high level places, currently still do it. What would you suggest to like somebody who's an up and coming strength coach, how to sort of get to where you are, or continuing to learn things on a daily basis, and maybe, walk in your footsteps.
Gosh, I know if I were to set out on this path today, I don't know if I'd ever would have got there. So I think part of it, I always kind of use this saying that who gets you there, what keeps you there. So with that said, trying to expose yourself to as much information, no different than you just said about soccer, right? You want to expose yourself to the best in the field to know what's possible. And to try and up your game. I think, trying to walk through as many doors as possible to see what's on the other side. I think you can learn a ton just from observing and watching how things are run and looking at gym setups and looking how teams operate. With the advent of the internet, the globalization of information, like it's so accessible, it's almost overwhelming. Like, where do you start between Twitter, Instagram, blogs, podcasts? Like sometimes my brain's going to explode. I can't process the information fast enough. So yeah, I think it's just getting out and making the effort. You know, I've had people say to me like, "Hey, Darce, I want to do what you're doing. You know, what do I need to do?" And you say, you know, like I had to make sacrifices and move my family to Europe and, you know, move them to maybe cities that I wouldn't necessarily enjoy living in long term. And you know, and one story that kind of comes to mind is somebody asked me that, and I was like, "Hey, I think, you know, there might be a role for you in this city." And they're like, "Yeah, I don't want to live there." And I'm like, "Okay, then, you know, it's not going to happen."
There's your answer.
Yeah. So it's, you got to be willing to kind of make sacrifices to get to those steps, take extra time. It's the way it is. And, you know, and I totally get it. If you're not willing to do it because you know, other values are important, then that's totally respectful. It's just, you know, you got to be honest with yourself and also it certainly can be done. So if you know, a kid from Northern Alberta can work for a European, you know, soccer team, I think it's really open to anybody, right? Like I even had a coach ask me, how does a guy from Canada end up working for Bayern Munich and Northern Alberta, Canada? So yeah, it's not a common path, but it's possible. So it's just a matter of putting the work in to get there. Like, you know, just like an athlete making it, right? And playing at one of the best clubs in the world. Like, I'm sure if you were to ask Lewandowski, he would just be like, you just got to work at it and sacrifice. And when people are doing this, you're doing that. And you just put in your time and energy and effort and keep working your process, and eventually you get there.
So along those lines, how would you talking about, you know, an athlete, you know, going through the ranks, you know, kind of going back to the beginning, we're talking about the, you know, the necessary, why S&C is necessary it's not always necessary, but, you know, for soccer, we want to focus on, you know, ball work, ball skill, get around the ball as much as you want. But do you recommend or suggest to young athletes that, you know, S&Cs can help you
100%,
certain aspects?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you know, it's movement skill acquisition, right? And as we mentioned, that, you know, when you play soccer, you only have the ball like 3 to 5% of the time, some even less. And so the rest of the time is, you know, running to accept the ball or defending somebody that has the ball. And so, you know, having the bigger repertoire of movement skills, strength, mobility, power, stability, all that stuff is going to give you the opportunity to better read, you know, to when you read a soccer situation, to apply the best response. And so, so it can certainly help if you take somebody that's extremely uncoordinated and somebody that's extremely coordinated and you put them in the same circumstance, you know, saying that they have the same power output and strength, just that coordination factor, the guy the person that's more coordinated is going to have the better opportunity to be successful. So it's certainly useful, 100%. Like the more, you know, a lot of skill acquisition is also learned in just playing the game, right?
Yes.
But sometimes the patterns that are developed aren't necessarily a pattern that you want for the long term. And so that's where, you know, kind of making and teaching those things. So your path is the path of least resistance, not more resistance. Because I've worked with some like pro soccer guys that are playing, you know, in first league European teams that are some of the most uncoordinated guys I've ever worked with. And so, you know, is it to say like they were able to do it, but they just outwork the competition, and that's their compensation or their superpower. And so if you improve their, you know, coordination and efficiency, they're able to work even better. So, yeah, you get all shapes and sizes. I think it's just like that running research. VO2 and running efficiency. The guys that have poor running efficiency have better VO2s, and the guys that have better VO2s typically have lower running efficiency, but it washes out to the end goal of, winning a race or, executing on a play to get the ball in the net.
Yeah. It's interesting that, I don't doubt that you've seen some high level soccer players being very uncoordinated. It's, I'm sure it happens a lot. So last thing I just want to kind of touch is, going, we kind of just talked about this, but like, are there tips that you would give to a youth soccer player, as far as, strength conditioning, taking care of their body, nutrition, that, could set themselves apart, we're in the US, a lot of kids want to play college ball, maybe make it to the next level after that, MLS, whatever. Are there any tips that you would say to youth kids to help them to get to that next level?
Yeah. I mean, I think in all sports or in life, you're faced with a lot of hurdles and a lot of obstacles. It's your kind of love for the game or whatever it is you're trying to pursue that allows you to get over those obstacles. And so kind of maybe one book I recommend it's a book called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, to kind of embrace the suck or embrace the process, because it's the process that's going to get you there, as easy or hard as it is. And our goal is this outcome, but you get there and all of a sudden it's not, kind of good enough, or it's not what you thought, or any of those pieces. So I would say just try and have as much fun doing what you are trying to do to get there. And, and that's all the above of what you're saying, just trying to live a kind of performance lifestyle, so strength training, performance training, technical, tactical training, all sides of it. Just have as much fun while you're doing it. 'Cause there will be days that, there's shitty weather, there's, maybe you're having some knee pain, maybe, the coach gave you a hard time, or, life's just holding you down, that get people to not train or not do those things. And then that is the piece that kind of is holding you from your goals. So I think just trying to enjoy it as much as possible. Because one of the things that kind of hit me, and it's going to sound super obvious, when we were at the World Cup in 2014, we're 6 weeks, you're in this tournament, and regardless of the day, if you just rolled a ball out onto the field, the guys would have fun with it. Like they would do whatever. They just pick it up and start playing and having fun. And, you just got to love it. If you love it, you'll get there for sure. It's just because you're going to be faced with those hurdles that are going to keep you from doing what you need to do. And you got to have the passion to kind of overcome that.
Awesome. Well, appreciate, again, like I said in the beginning, you taking the time out to talk to me. It's always good to learn from myself a little bit out of this. But appreciate it. And thank you again. And hope you have a good rest of the day, and look forward to chatting with you sometime. Yeah, well, again, appreciate it. I'm glad you got something out of it. Hope the listeners do as well. And it's appreciate you just reaching out. I think that's, like we talked about, if you don't try, then it's not going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I was telling somebody this exact same thing that you just said. If you don't, reach out, there's that quote that they say, it's like, if you don't ask, it's always a no. So yeah, like, why not? Yeah. I mean, there's just, we kind of get those preconceived notions in our head. And so, I like to be helpful and try and, pass on my experiences, to benefit the greater good for where it can. And, obviously I try and answer all the emails I get and questions. I also have to prioritize things to allow me to get to my goals. But, if I can, I'm certainly happy to help. And Awesome.
or at least, get people moving in the right direction. So, appreciate you reaching out, and nice meeting you. And
thank you. Nice meeting you too. And I'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it. All right. See you, Darcy. Have a good day. All right.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to Train to Perform with Julian Sisman. Learn how you can work with Julian in a personal training session, either online or in person, at prepareforperformance.com. And follow on social media for more tips on training, fitness, and sports performance. On Twitter @jsisman_PFP and Instagram @prepareforperformance.